So a lot of people that's gone through these dynamics of like these toxic relationships, right? And it could be a family member or friend or a client, and they would ask like, why do I keep on going back or attracting these kind of type of relationships that are extremely toxic? And it's just like I always give myself up, and it's never enough, and all these things in between. But what happens a lot though, it's like I'm gonna bring up something called codependency, right? Not everyone that gravitates towards these kind of relationships are codependent, but at the same time, it's like they're kind of attracting that because you see, when you're extremely codependent, usually the codependent is anxiety driven, very timid. They need the validation of their abusers in a weird way. And so that's why a lot of abusers target codependents, because they're very easily to manipulate, because they know they need that validation for them to feel important and to carry on in the relationship. And you see, codependents are givers, like most of them are very giving, you see. But with the abuser, what happens is that they're takers. So it's like that dynamic is never going to work. And so what happens with the codependent is that they tend to work a lot harder to get that validation, to get that love from their abusers. Okay? And what happens with codependency usually starts from a young age. Usually the parent or the caretaker was definitely an abuser, or anyone that actually showed them that they need reliance on them, who actually took advantage of the codependent. And from there, that's kind of how they navigate in a weird sense. Like they see their abusers as protectors in a weird way. So a lot of the times too, codependents are afraid to be alone, so they'll lower the boundaries. They'll kind of lower, their standards, as a being, just to make someone else happy. And I've seen this been repeated time after time with people who are extremely codependent. And that's why they jump into these relationships over and over, because they do become easy targets to the abusers. All right. And then here's the thing too, it's in a weird sense though, with codependence, like kind of all they know is it's that form of treatment. And so they know that if they were to, how would I say, lower their boundaries a little bit and be a little bit of a people pleaser, they'll get some reward back, which is like a little bit of love, admiration, and that, okay, that you're a good person, that you're doing good, and this is what you need to keep on doing. And so they kind of heavily rely on that behavior. So in a weird sense, it's kind of normalized in their minds, to behave this way. And you see, codependents, though, they absorb a lot of people's problems. And they in a lot of ways, too, they sacrifice their own well-being and mental health, though, into pleasing the other person, just to get a little love back, And I'm not talking about codependency, like, at all. When it comes to, like, drugs or alcohol, that's different, that's kind of like a different codependency. On a substance. And I'm just talking about in an emotional level. And so most of the time too, the codependent has trauma. Usually they come from a background of heavy family trauma. See PTSD as well. There's a lot of symptoms of that, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so in this case though, there needs to be deep diving into fixing that. Codependents do have a chance to reverse that and to be more healthy in how they navigate and how they validate themselves, because they rely heavily, first of all, on the abuser for that validation, when they should be relying on themselves for the self-validation, okay? And those are the things that the abuser cannot do. That's why they take advantage of usually codependents. That's why they're so attractive to them. But at this point, though, if you suffer from codependency, there needs to be extreme deep diving, because they're specialists on trauma, and with trauma therapy, that's extremely helpful for someone extremely codependent, especially for the codependents that actually realize that they're actually codependent, because a lot of them like to deflect and like I've heard this with a lot of people where they're um, pushing away the idea that they could be possibly codependent because, it's like, no, I did this. I stood up for myself. I did this. I'm not like this. But then, yet again, they rely heavily on the validation of the abuser. And they keep on repeating these same cycles. And then they even say that they will actually settle for that because they don't think that they can get better. And that's what I notice a lot with codependents, because they're usually anxiety driven, very timid. They're usually the ones that don't really stand up for themselves. And so, that, like I said, that's why they become easy targets. And at the same time, if you catch on to your behavior patterns, and you really want to seek that help, there's a lot of resources out there, and like I said, there's people that specialize in trauma therapy, or if normal therapy is good for you, good enough, go into that, and seeking help is not a bad thing. It does not make you weak or anything. In fact, it's the opposite. It actually proves that you're willing to change. You're not going to be stuck how everyone sees you, how you see yourself. Once you start moving forward, you start building that momentum, and then from there things become easier and easier over time. So, realize, just like anything, realizing your weaknesses and your faults. From there you can build strength.